So that solves you. If you solve it, then that will give you some sort of, some reasonable thing. And then he's writing here the log likelihood, and you are taking is shape and scale will be always on the positive side of the real line. So you are taking e to the power of the theta. That makes sense. And then, okay, all right. Same way, fine. Okay, then.
Then I have
Hmm.
initialized the theta with like considering the inverse of the functions that I've taken in the log likelihood function.
Hmm.
So that's that, and theta hat is equal. Theta hat gives me the, optim dollar par gives me the parameters directly into theta hat,
Hmm.
and then I am extracting shape one, scale one, shape two, scale two dot hat, and p dot hat from the theta hat that I've
Correct.
obtained,
Correct.
and f hat is basically the estimated PDF,
Hmm.
and so I'll plot the histogram again just to like make it clear, and now the lines should give me the fitted value.
Hmm.
This is what the fit looks like, and AIC2, I've just
This is the
named this.
AIC of the two mixture of two gamma.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you try the mixture of two normal? The
Yes, sir.
AIC for what
Yes, sir.
was,
Yes.
yeah, what was that AIC?
Just a second, sir. This was where is it? Just a second, sir.
Sure.
Uh, Here is it. So it's this value 2079.215. Somewhat close, but
Two, no, no. So two. So okay.
this was
Do
this is 2 gamma.
okay. This is two gamma, and that was two normal. So if you
Uh,
just write C in console, you write C within bracket AIC1 and AIC2, comma AIC2, right? So this is, you can see that both models are almost equally good. So, but which one is smaller? The first one is smaller, right? So if we have to choose one, probably we'd prefer one, but both of them are doing equally good. And any idea why it is so? Why both the models are actually doing equally good?
so, sir, like it has to do with the skewness actually. The skewness, like when we are using the mixture distribution, actually we are cutting off a lot of the tail portion of the gamma distribution, so it
Not
fits well.
really. Not really. So there is a property of gamma distribution which says that if shape and scale they become larger and larger, then the gamma distribution start behave like a normal distribution. Okay. So that's why modeling two normal, so modeling two gamma almost behaving like two normal. So that's why. Anyway, so that's just a side comment. Uh, all right. So, and did you try the mixture of gamma and normal?
Yes, sir. Just a
Okay,
second.
right.
Uh, this is the same thing. The green lines are just like a rough estimate of what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
The first peak, I'm assuming that it's from gamma distribution, and the
Mm-hmm.
second peak is from normal distribution.
Correct.
And I have written the log likelihood function. Let me execute this. the initial values of theta is like as it is from what we have got from the above two models.
Mhm.
Theta hat is estimated. So for this again, this is what the fitted thing looks like.
Mhm.
And the AIC is like decreased a lot.
Hmm.
So I'll just combine the thing.
Yeah, significantly 2-digit less. Yeah. So the first mode you modeled with gamma,
Yes, sir.
and second mode you model with normal.
Yes, sir. I did the reverse
Hmm.
also. I did
Hmm.
the reverse also, but the AIC was like close to the like the previous two models. So
Huh, got it. Yeah, clearly this model is at least 2-digit, looks like 2-digit um, advantages. So yeah, so the first mode with gamma and second mode with normal is doing superior to the mixture of 2 gamma, 2 normal or something like that. So that's pretty good. So now I think also remember that one last discussion, I mean, the discuss from on the last day, Shuli asked me one question that, okay, we fit the day model now, what to do, what we do with it. Actually, just fitting the model doesn't stop. That's just fitting the model is just one part of the data scientist work. At least that is called typically the you know data science one, like development of the models. And then typically what will happen is in industry what we will do, we will put it into uh, more we will put it into production. And what I mean by production in this case, if somebody wants to know, like, what is the probability that if I arrive at the national park, Yellowstone National Park, I want to see the geyser to go up, then what is the probability that I have to wait for, say, 1.5 hours, or more than 1.5 hours, or more than 2 hours, something like that. Okay. Or what is the probability that we will see the geyser to go up within 30 minutes of our arrival. So this kind of probabilistic inference we can do with the fitted model. Okay, so that is the main purpose actually, that we want to do we want to make some kind of predictive inference with the fitted model. And that is the purpose of the fitted model. Okay. Any question so far? All right. Uh, Let me share my desktop. Okay. Um, I I will bring another data set. Uh, so one assignment I'm assigning, that now you know how to draw histogram and how to draw the density. What the assignment that I'm doing, assigning to you, is draw the histogram and fitted density using ggplot. Okay, try to figure this out. If not, then next week I will discuss how to do that. But I'm hoping if you do little bit of search, you should be able to do that. But if not, then or ggplot2 rather, ggplot2 package in R. Okay, so now you know what is histogram, what is density, how to fit a density, and any density. In fact, you know how to make a new density as a mixture. I mean, mixture of any densities could be a new density, right? So you can define your own probability density functions, at least at the univariate distribution. And then point is, once you have that mixture of densities, then question that I'm also, it is important to how to draw nice histogram and the density. So we know how to do it using simple plot and hist function that is available in the base package. But what I want you to do is to do it using ggplot2. Generally, they provide much better, aesthetically better plot. Okay. Uh,
Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
Sir, I have a question regarding the quantiles of this bimodal graph. So, I mean, I tried to calculate the central 90% this quantile. So, sir, that is also, but when we calculate that quantile, it also includes those areas where the probability is very low. Like in case of single model distribution, if we calculate the central quantiles, it only give us that interval where the probability is maximum. But in case of bimodal, it is also including that part where the probability is very low as compared to other regions. So, is there some way we can break this central quantile into two disjoint sets, two
I
disjoint
don't get
intervals? I
your
mean, because
point. What do you mean by? I really don't get your point, because what is quantile? Quantile is effectively so
uh, it's
p
like
of x less than say q, and that probability is p, right? So, or I would just say x p some value, and then that probability. So naturally, so I really don't get your point. I mean, what do you mean by probability is low?
Uh, sir, I mean, if we, uh, uh, in case of single model distribution, if we directly, if it, so can I mean, I think it will be easy for me if I can draw that picture. I
Okay,
mean,
I
yeah,
can, who is it? I can
Ayush,
make it.
Ayush.
Ayush, okay. Um, so I'm making you co-host. You should be able to. Yeah, I made you co-host. You should be able to.
Yes. So, sir, in single model distribution, if we ask to calculate the central 95% this quantile interval, so we get something like this. So this interval that we are getting, it has the maximum probability. I mean, like the between this part and this part, anything outside this interval has a lesser probability for any value, right? But in case of our this two model distribution, we are getting something like this. So when we calculate central, soon like this, go even below that, right? So if we calculate central quantiles in this way, So we
Mhm.
will get something like this. This is a whole continuous interval. So this
Correct.
particular region has a low probability
Mhm.
other than this. So I was thinking like if someone asks us to do this thing,
Mhm.
someone asks us to do this. Yeah. So if we can we do something like this rather than giving this one continuous interval, we can break
Mhm.
this interval into two part.
Mhm.
Where I mean, this is no longer a continuous interval; it's a two disjoint interval. But that whatever the uh, points that we are include
Yeah,
range.
yeah, I got your point. Yes. So, so this idea of is more popular in the Bayesian statistics. It's called highest posterior density region. So yeah, so what people do in this case is basically um, you can all you can typically figure out the confidence instead of confidence interval. You will figure out a confidence set, right? So confidence set where you have the maximum density, and in that case, in a bimodal case, it will have two interval, and two interval which will together will have 95% confidence, probability, 95% probability, but it will together it will have a confidence, create your 95% confidence set. So yes, that is very much very much as a concept you are correct. But in order to do that, you need to have a separate algorithm. So not that I know of, most of the off-the-shelf R programs will be basically will give you um, off-the-shelf programs will give you just quantiles which are effectively give you the entire thing. That will include the low density region, low probability regions as well. Yes. But what you are looking for that, you need to probably have to first develop an algorithm and then you have to codify it. You have to
So
put it into the
it means
program.
like if we have to provide some 90% confidence interval, so central, so we can include this low probability region also, rather than giving
Correct.
this maximum probability everywhere.
Correct. So if you are looking for only confidence interval, then it is okay. But if you are looking for the highest probability density region, 95, which will 95% highest density region, then of course you have to do what you are suggesting. And I don't think any off the shelf algorithm, at least I have not seen any off the shelf algorithms which does that.
Sir,
Okay.
what is the use of this high density region? Like we are only interested in whether the points lie in the given like my desired interval or not. So what is the use of that density?
Um, so basically, highest posterior density region will tell you that, okay, this is the area where you have the maximum chance of seeing the numbers. This is the idea, right? So in this case, you can say that, okay, within 60 and within 40 and 60, we will see most of the cases, and within maybe 70 and 100, we will see most of the cases. So you are basically excluding the 60 and 70. So this is a more precise statement rather than you are saying 90% of the cases will come from 40 and 100. So it's a too big a region. Instead of you are saying most of the cases will come from 40 to 60 and 70 to 100. Then this is a much more precise probabilistic statement. So that is what Ayush is suggesting. And he's correct in that sense. But unfortunately, I don't think off-the-shelf algorithms or off-the-shelf programs in R can actually provide it. in some Bayesian packages, if there are some, there is a concept called highest posterior density region. Okay, HPD region or HPD set. In some Bayesian R packages, if there are algorithms, if you want to implement that, you may have to, I think you should look for HPD, highest posterior density region sets algorithm for those algorithms actually try to model that, rather than, because they think of there are likelihood oftentimes which are not nicely concave or convex unimodal. They are not. There might be a likelihood you can come up with which has a bimodal in nature. In that case, you would like to have, instead of confidence interval, you would like to give a confidence sets. So yeah. Any other question? Okay. All right. So next topic, next data set that I would like to work with is called MTCars data set. And it is also, these are all very popular data set that we have in the R. So let me just make it a little bit. So this data was extracted from 1974 Motor Trend US magazine and comprises fuel consumption and 10 aspects of automobile design and performance for 32 automobiles. Okay, so there are actually 11 variables. Okay, the first variable stands for miles per gallon. Okay, that is the measure for fuel consumption, and the rest of the 10 variables stands for different engineering aspect of automobile car. So number of cylinders, displacement, gross horsepower, rear axle ratio, weight, 1 to 4 miles, quarter miles in time, engine. 0 means it's a V-shaped engine and 1 means it's a straight engine. Transmission, if it is a automatic or manual. Gear is number of forward gears, and carbs is number of carburetors. Now these are, you see, from these 10 features are all different features of an automobile car. Now suppose, imagine yourself, you're a engineer working in an automobile industry, and somebody is working in the design division. In the design division, they have come up with a prototype car, just the print, some prototype in the computer design, they have designed it, and it has all the basic engineering features like number of cylinder, displacement, gross horsepower, rear acceleration, all these things are there. What is not there is miles per gallon. Why? Because in order to have a miles per gallon, you have to have a prototype car, you have to run the car for a while, and then you will know what is the miles per gallon. So if you can, using this data set, if you can actually predict what is the, so this is, here is the 32 cars for which the data is available. And using this data set, suppose you have a prototype car here for which all these variables are available. What is not available is miles per gallon. And if you can, using these points, if you can say something about the miles per gallon, that will be actually pretty cool. Okay. So what we will do before we even start, we will start with, so our main objective, main target variable is miles per gallon. So we'll try to first understand and study the MPG, miles per gallon, and then we will study its behavior with respect to the other variables. So main target variable that we want to understand and study and predict is miles per gallon. That is our main objective. So what I will do, I will first look into how this miles per gallon is actually working, is distributed. So it is an interesting behavior. Okay. So you can see one of the problem with the histogram is depending on the number of the class width, your behavior changes a bit. The behavior of your, the distribution changes a bit. Now, what kind of distribution you think this is a right distribution? If I ask you to make an educated case about the distribution, what kind of distribution you would like to think of? So one
Sir,
so then
gamma or chi-square.
Gamma or chi-square. Okay. Gamma or chi-square. Now, chi-square is a special case of gamma. Okay. If you take gamma shape equal to a by 2 and scale equal to a by 2, then gamma basically, that will be your chi-square distribution with degrees of freedom equal to a. Okay. So chi-square is really not, chi-square is really a special case of gamma. So we would prefer in that case gamma rather than a chi-square. So why, okay, any other thing, any other?
Some other, some other combination of two probability distribution, because there seems to be two peaks at one at around between 15 and 20 and after 30, between 30 and 35. So
Okay.
it could be like a bimodal, like
Okay.
the last thing.
Could be bimodal. All right. Bimodal. Okay. Somebody Positively skewed normal distribution. Okay, could be my model. So mixture of two. So one suggestion is positively skewed normal. I don't know how to make normal positively skewed. So I'm a bit worried. I don't know. There are some very complicated version of skew normal distribution, but that's on the multivariate statistics domain. So I don't know. Probably that can be extended to.
So with the higher number of bars, there's some of the portion of the histogram was missing. So
Correct.
we can take like two probability distribution with the tails cut off. I mean, in that way.
Hmm.
Truncated distributions, basically, two truncated distributions.
Okay.
So, I mean, for the after 30, we can keep a uniform distribution, and between 10 and 27, we can keep some normal distribution.
Okay.
I mean, but with the tails cut off, with the limited support.
So if we try to use the uniform distribution at the end, then that may cause a discontinuity point. Like that is a
Okay.
problem.
Sir,
Mm-hmm.
sir, if you increase the number of classes to 20, then there would be more cutoffs in this. So I don't think like bimodal would be appropriate, like tail cutoff, because there are more cutoffs then.
So how many mixture will be correct in that case? So actually what is happening is here is probably one or two cases. This is one cases. This is maybe 3 or 4 cases. So when we are making too many classes and the class width are becoming small and small, and each class we are getting only 1 or 2 observations.
We
Right?
have only
We can
37 data points, and
Correct.
we take 20 classes, then we're
Correct.
gonna try to fit it very
Yeah. So now,
extensively.
okay,
So that's not.
also, so you can think of, here is one normal, here is one normal, here is one normal, so each point is sort of a one normal. Then I can fit as many mixtures as possible, but we have end of the day, remember that how many samples we have only 32 samples, correct? In the old faithful data set, it was working pretty cool because we had how many data set? I don't know. How many? I think 150.
308.
308. So we had enough 272 samples we had, right? So we had enough data points to fit 2 mixtures. The problem we will see, and the problem that I'm trying to show you is if you have too less of a sample, if your sample size is small, if you try too complex a distribution, then you may run into something very weird. Okay, so you have to be very careful whether the distribution at all makes sense or not. So, and one of the problem is even with 2 mixture, how many parameters we have, and we are trying to model. We are trying to model 5 parameters. Now, if I make if I define a distribution with 3 mixtures, okay, so then how many, with let's say 3 normal mixture of 3 normals. So how many parameters I have to add? I have to estimate.
6, sir.
Why?
Like mean and standard deviation for each of the normals.
Each of them.
Plus
And what?
2 more, 8 of them.
8 of them. Yeah, because you have mixture probabilities also, right? So you have P1 normal M1 S1 plus P2 normal M2 S2, and then finally what I will do, I will do S1 minus P1 minus P2 normal M3 S3. So I have to compute 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then P1, P2. Okay. So my parameters are going to increase drastically with the mixture as I keep increasing the number of parameters. If I keep increasing the parameters, too many parameters, my model will become too complex. But my information that I have in my hand is finite. All I have these 32 parameters, 32 data points. So my information is finite. Information set is finite. So we should be very careful. Increasing number of parameter may lead to some serious problem. So Prashun Agarwal is saying increasing the number of parameters may lead to overfitting. Is it correct? The answer is yes. So increasing number of parameters, may lead to overfitting. Overfitting is a concept that in your DMML class, Professor Madhavan will discuss. So I'm not going to discuss this, but this overfitting concept is very important. Okay. So basically what happens end of the day, remember that my data set is finite. I cannot increase my data set unless I'm observing newer and newer data every day. If my data set is finite and if I make too complex a model, my complexity, so basically as I will keep increasing my complexity of my models, the number of parameters will keep increasing. So I have to estimate too many parameters. If you estimate too many parameters with too little data points, then obviously you will run into something called overfitting that Professor Madhavan will discuss in his class.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So over here, the task at hand is to estimate the mileage from the 10 given parameters, right?
10 given features of the car.
Features, sorry, not parameter, features. Then why are we trying to estimate the distribution of mileage?
No, I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Before that, I'm just motivating you with like if I have to first model this thing, then how you do that. So that is, I'm just trying to model.
Sir, if we are plotting the density plot rather than histogram, so it is not having any this discontinuity problem. And I think from that plot, it seems that there could be two.
No, I agree. It's just a histogram is always a motivation of the thing. Okay. Because everybody understands histogram. Typically class nowadays, even in class 8 syllabus, they are introducing the concept of histogram. At least in the CBSE syllabus, I know they are doing it. Class 8, class 9. So histogram everybody understands. So that is from where I'm coming from. Then density is definitely much complicated concept that is not being introduced. In the school level, you need to have a little bit more calculus to understand. So I agree. So we can try to fit a density here. So let's decide like, okay, we will make our life little simpler, and we decide to fit a simple, maybe a gamma distribution. Okay, and we will use a method of moments method. So mean of MPG is this, and variance of MPG is this. Okay. So I always keep forgetting about this shape and scale, and then here mean shape is A. So basically we are going to follow fit gamma, shape equal to A and scale equal to S. And they're saying that expected value of X is A times S. Expected value of X is A times S, and variance of X is A times S square. So I'm using method of moments because it's just quickly it's a dirty way of quickly getting the numbers and get it going. Okay. Then equate it to this, equate it to 6.23. So basically A dot S, I can write this as times S equal to 36.4. So that gives me S equal to divided by this guy. So 1.808013. And then we do know that this, so S equal A equal to this divided by S, which is divided by 1 point this. This is 11.8. Okay. So we now got it. Okay. So this is what we are getting. Okay. Now, up to this, are all of you with me? Now I will try to,
So,
yeah.
so over here, due to lack of data, a lot of things are getting considered as outliers also, I guess.
Why outliers? I'm not
I
sure.
mean, if we increase the class at the end, uh,
I mean, if you increase the class, you can't really model it in that way. I'm just getting some sense of, whether it is okay. If you just do it in this way, probably it is okay. I mean, that is one
yeah,
of the problem with histogram. If you increase it, then probably it will look better. If you don't increase it, so that is why chi-square goodness of fit test doesn't work so well, because uh, if you do the chi-square of goodness of fit test with 5 class, probably it will be a good fit. But if you run a chi-square goodness of fit test with 10 class, it will be a bad fit. Okay.
okay.
So that is what it's all about. So, but my main issue is, I mean, don't look for the visualization too much. And that is also another point that I want to make, that the scale is also very important. Here is basically number of class is creating a scaling effect in the visualization. So if I take 5 class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it looks very nice. Okay, except this class has little less, but overall it looks like reasonably okay. And as if this class and this class has sort of switched their numbers, but overall it looks like pretty well. But if I increase it to 10, then it doesn't look so good. If I increase it to 15, it doesn't even look so at all so good, or 20, even worse, right? So visualization could be a little misleading. It could be well, but it's only guide. It only give you a sense of some. So you have to be a bit careful in the terms of scale. What scale you are presenting the data. So let it be there. And I actually am trying to make another point here. Let us move on and let's try to make the point that I'm trying to make. So if you look into the main, the MT-cars data set. So, okay, let me take this AM thing. Okay. If what I will do, so if you look into the entire data set, you see, there are only two type of cars. One, I mean, if you just look into the automatic transmission, AIM, I think AIM equal to 1 stands for automatic transmission. No, sorry, 1 stands for manual and 0 stands for, so AIM automatic or manual. So 1 stands for manual and 0 stands for automatic. Okay, so there are quite a few automatic cars and there are some manual transmission car as well. So what we will do that, and we want to check whether overall they have, this has any effect, transmission has an effect on the miles per gallon. So what we will do, we will create two sub data set. Okay, one with manual So empty cars. Equal to 1. So these are the cars which are all have manual transmission. And similarly, we can create automatic. So these are the cars which have all automatic transmission. Okay. Now, what I can do is we can just look into in the manual, we can just calculate what is their mean, average, what is their average, and what is their, say, standard deviation. So these two I want to calculate. In the manual transmission. And similarly, I want to calculate what is the average and standard deviation with automatic transmission. So what do you think? In the manual transmission, on an average, cars are running 24 miles per gallon. In the automatic transmission, cars are running 17 miles per gallon. Okay. There is a bit difference in the variability also. Okay. So looks like there is a significant difference in the behavior, automatic transmission and manual transmission. Is there a distributional behavior also? So let us check it out. So what we can do, so we can just first what we can do, we can just draw miles per gallon MPG miles per gallon. But what I will do, I will just say X lim is between 10 and 35. So okay. And then this is the automatic one. Let's see the automatic, how it behaves. So this is, let me do it once more. Clear it. Main equal to this. See, I'm asking both the plot to have a scale on the x-axis same 10 to 35. Then only we will be understanding what is exactly happening. So this is the manual cars, distribution of the manual cars. They are in the range of 15 to 35. Okay. Whereas these are the distribution of the cars which has an automatic transmission. So they are in the range of 10 to 25. Almost no car is available which has a transmission miles per gallon above 25. So there is a significant difference between the manual transmission and the automatic transmission. The miles fuel efficiency is superior in the manual transmission than the automatic transmission. Okay, but here by default system is giving us a little bit different kind of distributional behavior. We cannot really make a sense of what is the distributional behavior here. So in class, maybe we can just say that, okay, in class is, can make it 10. Let us make that, yeah. So that is too many probably. You can make it 5 and 5. That probably will make it a little bit better. Yeah, but still, yeah, same problem that we are seeing. Question is, can we model it somehow? How can we model it? Right now, these two histograms are actually sitting sort of separately because we are creating two sub data set, one for the manual transmission, another is for the automatic transmission. How can we model these two data set and separate in the one format? Any idea? There is another way of also plotting this. There is something called box plot. Are you guys aware of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So some of you may aware of it, some of you are not. So I don't worry. I am going to explain you the thing. Data equal to empty cars. Color equal to maybe sky orange and green. So let me just actually do slightly different. Okay. So let me explain you what is box plot. So on the y-axis, they are plotting the miles per gallon. Okay, and so 0 automatic transmission, 0 means automatic, and 1 means manual. Now what it is doing, it's taking the all the cases which are automatic, that means this sub data set, and calculating the median and saying that, okay, here is my median, and then this is the first quartile and this is the third quartile. So first quartile is basically below which 25% of the observation lies, and third quartile is above which another 25% of the observation lies. So that means within first quartile and third quartile, 50% of the observation lies. With a median is here, this is also called second quartile. Now here, this is the manual transmission, the ones which are with the manual transmission. Here, this is the first median or the second quartile. This is the first quartile and this is the third quartile. These are called whiskers of the box plot, means the two low end of the distribution. And how these whiskers are done, typically there are different kinds of algorithms are available. So I have to check a bit. Sometimes you will see some points are given outlier. If there are outlier, they will be put outside the whiskers. Unfortunately, we do not have any outliers, so we don't have to worry about it. But more or less within these two bands, you can see within the whiskers, all of the variables are, all of the observations are plotted. Okay, so all right, next is, so this is two way of, just same thing effectively. I'm just presenting the same information effectively, but two different way. One is I'm just creating two histogram, and but remember that if I have to compare them correctly, you have to be careful about the scale. Like when I'm doing this one, say when I'm drawing these two histograms, these histograms, in order to compare the two, let me put the first one as manual, and the second one is the automatic. Color also, let us maintain the same color, then it will be easier for us to understand which one I want. So for manual we used green, so it's green, and for automatic we used orange. Okay, so let us draw this. So in order to compare the manual to automatic, we have to make sure, you have to make sure the scales are correct. They're on the same scale. That is, then and only then they will be correctly comparable. But one thing I want to tell you, that most likely their distributional behavior is very different. Okay, so just keep in mind how can we, and modeling it very difficult for each of them, but we will come up with certain models which will probably handle these kind of issues. And but you have to be just not all model can handle these kind of issues, but somewhat solves the problem. And this is the alternate way of presenting the same thing, is this one, where you can see that median, there is some sort of positively skewedness we are seeing here, because the gap between the first quartile and the median is too small than the third quartile and this one. So their distributional behavior is slightly different, but clearly manual has a significantly more fuel efficient than the automatic transmission. Okay, so I would rather put, I think I would, let me put another. So you have, first thing is you draw histogram and density using ggplot. Also another small assignment is you draw the box plot. So this is called side-by-side box plot. I'm plotting two box plots side by side. And when I'm doing this kind of subsetting of the data, sometimes it's called faceting. Okay. So the subsetting or faceting, subsetting or I think I'm correctly writing it. So faceting, okay, or facet, simply facet, subset or facet. Okay, so draw a box plot or side by side box plot using ggplot. Okay, ggplot2, and also there is draw the scatter plot using ggplot2. So in ggplot2 there is also one thing is there called qplot. Don't use qplot. Don't use qplot. Qplot stands for quick plot. I mean, if you want to do quickly, then of course you can use qplot, but ggplot2 or ggplot use something called layered architecture or grammar of graphics. So I want to start the grammar of graphics. So ggplot2 uses the grammar of graphics or something called layered architecture for graphics. So in fact, nowadays what I have heard, Tableau also use the same concept of grammar of graphics. So it is it has becoming a norm to follow now this grammar of graphics. And it's very useful also. So you like first is you do a layout the foundation. You in the foundation you say, okay, in the x-axis you do this, y-axis you do this is your scale. Then you said that I want to this geometric shape or that geometric shape. Then you say, okay, this is my color, this is my aesthetic, this is so all these things comes into the layer after layer after layer. So that is why it's called layered architecture of graphics, or more precisely it says grammar of graphics. So next week we will start grammar of graphics or ggplot through the ggplot2. And before that I would request you to try this out. And if you can do it, fine. If you can't do it, don't worry, we will do it in the class. Okay. Anybody have any question?
Sir, if we are trying to model the MPG, and then we are trying to know first whether this transmission is actually effective or not, why don't we directly follow the usual ANOVA diagnostics and check the p-value and decide
So
whether
you probably are coming from stat background, right, Aviru?
yes sir.
Yeah, but not everybody is from the stat background. So I just, for though the people who are coming from engineering background or math background, I am trying to motivate them, and eventually I will try to go to the ANOVA or regression kind of thing. Okay. So the people who are from stat background, you have to hold your patience. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So I'll go to that, those more complicated methodology. But before that, I would like to motivate you to, if we want to use ANOVA, why we want to use ANOVA? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? I want to understand the motivations of because even in the ANOVA models, there are a bunch of assumptions we will make, whether even those assumptions are correct. So those things I want you to understand. Okay, so I'm kind of motivating those things using simple graphical approach. Okay.
Okay, sir. Also, sir, while we are drawing the scatter plot, do you want us to include all the factors uh, is it the kind of scatter plot we do for the diagnostics to check the collinearity between the factors, or just a simple scatter plot?
Simple scatter plot.
Okay,
Like
sir.
if I just have to do a plot, so like, so what are the things we have? So empty cars, we have say miles per gallon and horsepower, right? So if I have to do that, so I'll just say, all right, horsepower, comma, miles per gallon.
Sir, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will just plot this and then this is equal to 20. So this is x-axis, I'm plotting horsepower, y-axis I'm plotting miles per gallon. So this is the, it is expected that horsepower and miles per gallon will have a negative relationship. If you have a big car with lot of horsepower, so naturally we know intuitively from our basic day-to-day experience, big cars always consume more petrol or more diesel, so naturally their fuel efficiency will be much less. But just, is it a linear behavior or is it a quadratic behavior? What do you think?
A quadratic behavior.
Looks like it's a quadratic behavior. So this is, I mean, this is a non-linear behavior. So this kind of, so plot, when we do a scatter plot, it gives us a sense that, okay, it looks like a, more like it's a quadratic or non-linear behavior. So we need to develop a non-linear model between, if I have to model miles per gallon as a function of horsepower, then we have to do it as a non-linear model. So we will do that. We will come to that eventually. But before that, I want to start with the, so this visualization actually helps us to motivate us to develop what kind of model will work, what kind of model will not work. So those kind of, what kind of assumptions we may have to make. So those kind of things will be very helpful. So ggplot2 is basically something I want to move on. Along the time we want, so one don't want to sacrifice on the concept of the statistics or the data analysis. So we will go back and forth between the statistical concepts, data analysis, visualization. So we will keep moving around between these, we'll keep touch upon these concepts. Okay. All right. Any other question?
So,
Mm-hmm.
sir, so in the end, what conclusion did we draw for modeling MPG from the given data set?
I'm not even, I have not even started modeling MIs per gallon. I'm just exploring. what I have done so far, that comes into something called exploratory data analysis. Okay. So this exploratory data analysis is an extremely important part of the, you know, of any data analysis. So I'm just started. So I've just started with the exploratory data analysis. And typically exploratory data analysis is visualization is part of the, or the graphics is the part of this exploratory data analysis. So we may have to create a bunch of graphs to understand the relationship between the variables or how the distribution of a particular variable. Then we may have to create a bunch of table like this, when we can create them as a, you know, table. We can put it into the table that this is mean, this is variance, this is for the manual car, this is for the automatic car. So we may have to create a bunch of tables. We have to make a bunch of, you know, plots. And this exploratory data analysis gives us a motivators to develop certain models. Okay. And then we start developing the models. When we come up, when I'm saying that we have to develop the models, we may basically, we will first thing we will do that. Okay, what we will write down the equations for the models. Then we figure out how many parameters are there in those set of equations. That means we have to estimate those parameters of those set of equations. How we will estimate? We will use the data to estimate those models, and we will find that likelihood turns out to be very useful. In likelihood method of estimation is very useful in terms of estimating the parameters. Once we estimate the parameters, then we will do the testing and we will do the inference from the models. So this is typically the process that we go. And when you will go to the industry, then what will happen that once you freeze the model, after doing this exercise, first you do the exploratory data analysis where visualization is part of your exploratory data analysis. Then you develop the models, you fit the models. This is typically the model development exercise. And once you fit the model, then you do the testing of the model. Once you figure out, okay, I have tried 5 different models and turns out these 2 models are the most, most accurate or most effective, then you put it into the production, and then people try it for a while in the production process, and you keep monitoring the performance of the model in the production. And then after a while, if you feel like, no, this model is getting, it's not, viable anymore, you take that out of the production and you retrain the model with this thing. So do you understand what I mean by production in this case, in context of data science?
No, sir. You can explain.
Okay. Let me give you a situation. Suppose you are working in the data science group of a bank. Okay. And say you have to develop credit scoring method for the bank. So what is credit scoring method? So people go to the bank, the branches, and they apply for, say, home loan or car loan. Then basically branch manager will go through certain procedure and they will approve the loans. So one of the procedure is what is the but if each manager takes their own decision, then there will be too much of variability. So what happens, they come up with some, in each branch manager will have their built-in software systems, where they will put in all kind of informations, like, whether the applicant is a service holder or the applicant is a business, running a business, or the applicant, what is the level of education of the applicant, all kind of thing, what is the income level of the applicant, etc., etc., etc. All this information goes into the model or into the software, and in the back end something happens and it gives you a decision to give the loan or not to give the loan. Okay, so in the back end what happens is, there is some built-in model is already there, that model is taking the decision. Okay, so what happens is, a bunch of data scientists already have a historical data. Using the historical data, they already have fit a model, they estimated all the parameters, and they said, okay, this is my final model. Once they agreed that, they have gone through the testing, development and testing of the models, and they found that, okay, this model is the most accurate model in terms of prediction accuracy, we are going to put it into the production. As soon as it comes into the production, basically that model is available in some server, backend server. Okay, a bank manager who is just maybe a BCom graduate, or or MBA graduate, is managing a branch in, say, somewhere, big branch with, say, 10 or 15 people. Say she or he is getting every day 3, 4, 5 loan application. They have to take the decision. What they do, there is a software in their system. They will feed all the informations. These informations will then go to the backend server and feed into the model that you guys have developed already. That model is made available to everybody, and that model will then give a decision to give the loan or reject the loan, approve the loan or reject the loan, and that decision will be displayed on the system, bank manager system. Okay, so, and once you finalize the model and put it into the production, probably that model will be in the production for a while, maybe a quarter, and during that time you have to keep, of course you have to monitor the thing and all these things, and then you have to take a call whether you want to update the model, you want to don't update the model. That's a whole lot of complicated procedure. So but by production, that is what I exactly mean, that people are actually using in the field your model to make a decision to approve the loan or not approve the loan, or to give the discount or not provide the discount. Okay, so that is what I mean by in production. Okay, is it clear? Anybody have any question?
Sir, I have a question related to the histogram that we plot today. Today also we see that when we plot the histogram of MPG, there was no, when we go to high number of bins, there was no proper shape to it.
Correct.
So why we are still, there could be some cases where there is no proper shape to data. So how can we decide it is a proper data or just a pure noise or some?
We don't have any choice in that case. Probably we don't, because if you have too little data, then probably we have no way to figure out what distribution it is coming from, or what data, what is the correct shape of the data.
No, sir, even if we have some, say we have some 10,000 rows or some.
No, if you have lot of data, generally you will get the figure out the shape.
So we always work with this assumption that the data is proper. It is not some random noise or.
No. What I'm trying to say, if you have reasonably large data, generally you will be able to figure out the shape. But if you do not have enough data, if you have only 30-40 points, okay, then it is oftentimes it is very difficult to get the sense of the actual shape of the data. Okay. And in that case, you have to make some educated guess. Okay, that the typical guess is I'm making an assumption that the distribution, the 30 data points I'm seeing, they're coming from a gamma distribution or a normal distribution. That is a assumptions that we are making, and you have to be consciously aware of it. You have to transparent about it, that we are making that assumption and we may be wrong.
And also,
Okay.
sir, the distribution that we have seen in statistics are like they have some very specific forms. So, is there some? I mean, I'm not from statistics, so I might not be aware of this. But is there anything uh, which is like much more applicable or generalizable? I mean,
No,
because
not really. I mean, typically what happens is people try one way to, if you try to make the one way of generalizing the distribution is by making mixtures of distributions. But the problem with the mixtures of distribution is you can make it a very general, but the complexity of the distribution will go up, right? Because the number of parameters are going up. Or you have to work with the particular shape of the distribution. If you feel like gamma is not a good distribution for your for the data at your hand, you try some other distribution, maybe log normal distribution, maybe gamma normal distribution, any other distribution you try. But what is most important is just be aware that you are making the assumptions that that you feel like this data is coming from this distribution. So one way of doing it, the way I have shown you the last day, that you fit different distribution, gamma or normal or log normal, and then you calculate the AIC, and suppose for the log normal distribution you got a AIC to be minimum, so you decided, okay, log normal, we will stick to the log normal. Now you doing an inference based on that. So, or you put it into the production. So that time you are basically making the assumption that your data is coming from a log normal distribution, or the data follow a log normal distribution. Okay.
And also, one more question about AIC. So in AIC, there's one parameter. I mean, there's one part for likelihood, and another part is for that number of parameters. So
Correct.
assume like in MPG case, we have 30 or 32 samples. So rather than making any model, if we decide, okay, we are just taking the whole data as a model. So I mean,
whole data is model.
I mean, we are not trained. I'm not sure. I mean, in computer science, we have taught about clustering. So, in some time, rather than making any specific thing, we directly use data to make something like nearest neighbor thing. Where we don't make any model, we directly take the data.
So this is an approach called distribution free approach. Okay, so distribution free approach means that I'm not making then this is a bit old approach called non-parametric methods. That means you are not making a particular choice of a distribution, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a randomness. There is an inherent random process of probability distribution is there. It is just that you are not making a distribution, a particular parametric distributional assumption. Like I'm not making a gamma distribution assumption or a normal distribution assumption, but still there is a distribution is there. You are aware of it. Okay, there is some distribution or some random behavior is there from which the data is coming. It is just you are making these nearest neighbor K class clustering methods. These are typically called distribution free approach or non-parametric methods. Yeah.
So the AIC value for these, I mean, this kind of thing will be very high, because likelihood we can. I'm not sure how we'll take likelihood. I mean, we can take uniform distribution if we have 30 samples, and the other parameter will be the -2 times log of the number of parameters. So number of parameters we can take number of samples. So AIC will always be less than any model that will fit to that data. So according to that sense, it seems better to use the data itself without fitting any model to it.
It will run into overfitting. So there is a call, you cannot say that, okay, this is the, my experience, you don't get married to a method or algorithm. If you try that, you have to make an educated call every time. That is my experience. Yeah. So it is better to try everything and then take an educated call instead of calling it randomly. Okay, this is the best method. And there is, there is no uniformly better model available so far for anything. Every time I have seen a new data, something new happens.
So sir, you mentioned something about distribution. So is there something that you can point out where can
What
read
do you
more
mean by
about this?
distribution?
Distribution free. Now you mentioned distribution free approaches. So I have not read of that.
Distribution free approach. Okay. There is something called non-parametric methods, which does not assume any distribution. Okay. So this is this is K, like, K nearest neighbor and all these things comes into that model, that approach effectively. There is a lot of things are there. So if you just distribution, just Google it, like distribution free approach or distribution free models, that will be. So basically they don't want to make any particular distributional assumption, like parametric distribution assumption. Like I don't want to make an assumption of Gaussian, I don't want to make a assumption of gamma, a particular shape, restrictive shape, I don't want to make that assumption. So if you do that, effectively what you are doing, your underlying assumptions is basically a mixture of lots of distributions. So you will have a lot of parameters. So end of the day, you will end up doing a lot of overfitting. So that is my educated case. So you have to be a bit careful about, it's good to have a distribution free approach. It's generally useful, but you have to be also a bit careful about the overfitting.
Okay, sir, I'll look into this.
Okay,
Thank
sure. All right, guys, let's end today's meeting and try those assignments, and we'll catch up Tuesday. Okay, bye.
Thank you, sir.